I will be staying up late with them, as will Baltimore Luke. Yes, Luke Jones joins us live via satellite from Shrewsbury, where he will be brewing coffee and doing the Barney Rubble thing. You're more of a morning guy, right, school teacher Luke? It's not normal for even the Syracuse version of Luke Jones to be up at 1 a.m. with the dulcet tones of Jim Hunter from Anaheim, correct?
No, I'm way more of a night owl, to be totally honest.
Really?
Yeah. So.
Well, your tweets better be good here because it's probably going to be better than the baseball.
Well, I have to say, first things first, my biggest disappointment of this West Coast trip is Shohei Ohtani was supposed to pitch Tuesday night.
I know.
And he sprained his ankle last week. Fortunately, it's not serious, but his start's going to be pushed back to the weekend, which means it's good news for the Orioles, I suppose, because overall he's pitched really well. But
well, it also brings the circus to town when he pitches, right?
Yeah, but it's disappointing from a baseball fan standpoint because this kid has been so exciting. This is unlike anything anyone who's living right now has seen. You can go back to Babe Ruth, but that was even very early in Babe Ruth's career. So Ohtani's been such a great story. I was looking forward to the possibility of him pitching against the Orioles, and I've been able to catch him a little bit on MLB Network, certainly, but that right off the bat was kind of a disappointing beginning to this road trip because, well, we're talking about an 8-20 baseball team, and we're talking about a team to turn this thing around to get to 85 wins, which would be the bare bones minimum to possibly make it as a wild card. They have to play like a 93-win team.
This is like the new magic number you're coming up with, right? Like the new magic number for what the Orioles need to do to be a 500 team.
Yeah. That's and look, I'm not saying, believe me, I'm not saying I expect that to happen. But if you kind of look at it at this point in the season because, well, you're not talking about making trades at the very beginning of May. Typically you're at least getting into Memorial Day or June when you really start talking about that stuff. So in the meantime, you have a lot of time to kind of ponder what could happen, and if you're still hoping for some kind of a dream turnaround, yeah, they have to play like a 93-win team the rest of the way just to get to 85 wins, which would be the bare bones minimum of having a chance at a wild card. Typically it takes 89, 90 wins to be in that wild card picture.
So what's the bad news, Luke Jones? Give me the bad news here on this. I guess this kind of a start really destroys everything, and for this team that's going through the decline of its owner, and I watched my mother die last year, so that's never pretty. You went through it with your grandmother, so I will never belittle that for what the Angelos family is going through, despite the fact that they have $2 billion to go through it. But there is the lawsuit with Masson. There is the Manny Machado thing. There is the Where's Buck and Duquette. And maybe John really has a strategy. Maybe John has a little list, of everything that's going to happen, and it's all going to happen after Dad declines and what's going to happen with the franchise or whatever. But in real terms, from a fan's perspective, from those of you who cover the team or me who try to cover the team and disseminate what the real strategy is here, for most of us on the inside who've been privy to this, we all sort of know there never really has been any one strategy other than what Mr. A thinks. And Mr. A doesn't think much lately, and somebody else is doing the thinking, and these are not transparent people. These are not public people. These are not trusting people. And I guess Brady Anderson, if I sat and had 3 grapefruit juices with him, he would probably know a whole lot because of his intertwinement into ownership and into the boys, that I would say Brady sort of spiritually owns the team right now as far as on the baseball side of knowing where the bones are buried. Who the hell knows the Masson side or the baseball side or what's going on with the goof selling the skyboxes over there and letting kids in for free and the business side of it. But from the baseball side of where this thing is going strategy-wise, I guess Brady Anderson would be the guy who will check off on whatever A-ball players they're getting for Manny Machado if they're dealing him. Because I don't know, we can sit here talk night about baseball, and we will as it unfolds. But they've had 2 days off here. They're going to go out into the middle of the night and play these games that, to your point, only become relevant if they win 10 of the next 12 or something like that, right? And maybe they can do that. I don't know. Their pitching's been good enough that if they could get some hitting, if some guys could get hot, I do think they could win 6 games in a row or something. I don't think they're moribund, and especially if Tillman's going to get a little better. But the baseball side of the future of this, if this year isn't a year, it then becomes about what deals you're going to make and who's making the deals, who's in charge, who's running the place. And I don't know that we're ever going to get to the bottom of that, but I think Brady Angelos, as I affectionately call him, I think he's as close to the center of all of this as anyone, right?
It feels that way, at least for right now. Now, does that mean Brady becomes the general manager, whatever the title you want to give him at the end of the season or in the off season? Maybe, but as we've seen some of these deals play out from the offseason, from Cobb to Andrew Kashner, Colby Rasmus, Chris Tillman, we saw that Brady Anderson and Buck Showalter had a lot of their fingerprints on some of these moves. That's not to say Duquette is completely disbanded from the organization and isn't making any moves, but it does really make you wonder about the hierarchy here as the trade deadline approaches. I mean,
well, it's always been a dysfunctional place, right? And I guess for the Ravens and what you sat out in the castle all weekend, that place has always been a very, very functional. I mean, you can pick on Ozzie, on Elam or Kindle or Perryman or which we do, but that place has always been really functional and strategic. And even if this Lamar Jackson DaCosta thing goes awry, and 3 years from now somehow they're 4-12 and they stink, they will have at least gone down to Jupiter and prayed about things and talked about things and had a strategy. And the owner, no doubt, had a role in Lamar Jackson the other night. Dick Cass, no doubt, had a role in making it a first-round pick as opposed to let's deal into the 33 and pick there because of the extra year on Jack. I mean, they know what they're doing. Boy, in the baseball side, man, I've always questioned this. I've been here from the beginning of time, and this is the time where every fan who's spending $1 down there should be asking, what are you guys doing? Like, where's the state of the Orioles? What are you doing to fix this thing? And I don't know that we're going to get an answer, but this is when the team's in fifth place. This is when the hard questions come out and the journalism has to come out. And usually what happens is Rosenthal comes in sniffing around or Jeff Passan comes in sniffing. It's always somebody from out of town who comes in and sniffs it out, and that's the way it started last month when John Angelos is making calls to Jeff Passan and Rosenthal, who a year ago sort of broke the news that Brady Anderson's sort of running the place or, that there's conflict here or whatever. But I think in talking to Scott Miller earlier in the week that this isn't going to be something that goes unnoticed if they're going to win 58 games this year. If it's going to be that bad, that people are going to sniff about this and people are going to ask questions. And, at some point, Peter's going to die, right? At some point, that's going to all be a front-page story. The Orioles are going to be a front-page story because they're not a front-page story when they're playing at midnight and they're in 5th place, Luke. They're not.
Well, of course they're not. I mean, if you're in 3rd place and playing at midnight, you're not. But for me, it really, I'm unmoved by the record right now in relation to this bigger picture. If the Orioles could be 8 games over 500, and Manny Machado is still a free agent at the end of the year. Adam Jones is still a free agent at the end of the year. Zach Britton and Brad Brock are still free agents at the end of the year, and Dan Duquette and Buck Showalter are still, they're having expiring contracts. So for me, it's not nearly as much about them being 8-20. It's much more about, okay, it's very clear at this point, barring a miraculous turnaround, that you're going to be in sell mode. There's not going to be we're only 3.5 games out of the second wild card on July 27th. What if we make a move here for an outfielder or a starting pitcher or another reliever or whatever, whatever move you're contemplating that's probably not going to move the meter as they did a year ago and as they did in 2015. I don't think they're going to be in that territory. So it becomes very much, what's the plan here? As far as trying to deal Manny Machado, as far as what you're doing at the general manager position, what you're doing manager-wise. I mean, what is the plan here? John Angelos, Lou Angelos, the Angelos family, however you want to describe them, what is the plan here? Is Dan Duquette, with his expiring contract, is he going to orchestrate trades? Is Brady Anderson, is Buck Showalter going to work in concert there? Are you going to make a new hire? There's precedent when they hired Andy McPhail midway through 2007. Are you going to do something like that, and you're going to have some kind of a two-headed operation between that individual and Brady Anderson? I don't know. No one knows, but what's apparent is this clock that's been ticking for the better part of 2.5 years, it's getting louder now. You can hear every second tick away much more loudly because they've come to the end. They've punted and they've waited and they've done nothing, and they've put this off for as long as they can, and it's time for the rubber to meet the road here in terms of at least with the players, these pending free agents. Now, you can continue to punt on general manager and manager if you prefer until the season's over, but you at the very least need to come up with some semblance of a plan for how are we going to get whatever return we can for some of these individuals in hopes of setting ourselves up a little bit better for the future. And we don't know how that's going to work. What's that going to look like? Is it Duquette? Is it Brady Anderson? Is it Brady and Buck and Dan's kind of cast to the side? I don't know. But time's running out. And you might say, well, the trade deadline's still 3 months away pretty much. Okay, yeah. But
well, let's take it to Seager, right? I mean, this is where we are, right? Like if
Sure.
the Dodgers come and say, here's a left-hander, a right-hander, an Asian player, a Venezuelan player, a minor league player, a major league player. Take this guy's contract. I don't even know where they begin on pulling the trigger in a Machado to the Dodgers for 5 players, and who picks those players? Because at the heart of it, that's really the story of how they won somehow. And when I would say when the book is written, I'm the only one that would write the freaking book. But when I write the book about how Andy McPhail and Peter Angelos fell in back during the negotiating phase, and somehow Andy wound up on the street out of Chicago after they almost went on strike, and Peter came in and saved the day back at the turn of the century, that somehow McPhail became buddies with Peter because Peter wasn't buddies with anybody. Peter couldn't find anybody to take this job. He had to go to the Cape Cod League and hire a guy like Duquette, who was blackballed for over a decade. He couldn't get into the sport to run the team because nobody in the industry would work for him. But Andy did. And Andy not only came in and worked for him, but Andy knew what he was doing. Andy was actually competent. And and I would say that changed everything. Andy McPhail's deft moves created Peter being able to die smelling better because they made the playoffs and they went to the ALCS. Because if Andy McPhail didn't take that gig, those deals wouldn't have been done. And the Adam Joneses and the Chris Davises and the Chris Tillmans would not have been properly identified. And how do I know that, Luke? I've been here 40 years watching the Juan Bells and the Manny Alexanders and the Glenn Davises for Harnish, Finley, and Anderson, and see what happens to an organization when that happens. And I've also seen what happens when Frank Cashin deals for Scott McGregor and Tippy Martinez and Rick Dempsey. It's a heart transplant. And that's why we're probably excited about Orlando Brown and Hayden Hurst and Lamar Jackson, because it does feel like these guys have a level of competence and they're picking the football players, unlike what happens in Cleveland every year with the Browns. And that should be what intelligent people are thinking about in regard to the Orioles, is who's running the place right now, who's going to pull the trigger when Corey Seager undergoes Tommy John surgery on May 1st. And that happened now. This is a wet dream for any organization looking to deal away Manny Machado, that the Dodgers need Manny Machado. And now let's go make it happen, and let's get 2 Adam Joneses, get 2 5 to 10 year legitimate Major League Baseball players back. And if you don't do that, 2021 is going to look like what the hell this mess has looked like in April. 5th place. I guess when Angelos dies, we can call it last place.
Well, it's last place. I don't have any problem calling it last place. But to your point, as far as this is an opportunity for them. And look, this doesn't mean that you have to make the trade on May 3rd. I mean, it doesn't have to happen this week, per se. but what this is, and we've talked about this from the point in the offseason when it looked pretty apparent that they weren't going to trade Machado, when after there had been so much buzz at the winter meetings, and the John Heymans of the industry were describing it as maybe 50-50, maybe a little better than 50-50 at that point, and then it never came to fruition because they didn't get a deal that they felt in their mind was fair, which that's their right, but then you have to understand that this is a depreciating asset in terms of, well, instead of a full year, it's less than a full year now. In the same way that if you wait until July 31st, it's 2 months, or 2 months in the postseason. But in the case of Seager, I mean, you have a young player here. This is an MVP caliber player already in his young career with the Dodgers. And you have a Dodgers team that has struggled early on. I think there absolutely is an opportunity here. And to make this even better, if you look around the teams that fancy themselves as contenders at this point, teams that are either were expected to be a contender or a team that is in contention, another team that you could point to and say, well, left side of the infield, they could use someone, the Arizona Diamondbacks, if you really assess some of these rosters. So you have two teams in the NL West now who very much could use Machado. And I've said all along, even teams that have solid situations at shortstop or third base, especially if Machado's going to hit 360 like he has to this point. He's played like an MVP caliber player.
Stocks high, sell high.
But my point is, you have two teams that the Dodgers with an immediate pressing need. Arizona was a team that you pointed to and say, that's a team that you would think should be trying to at least contemplating a run at Manny Machado whenever the time comes, whether it's this month, whether it's June, whether it's early July, whenever.
You go to Arizona, wears Mr. Miami jersey.
Yeah, but you have these two teams, and then the hope is, well, other teams in the National League say, well, we don't want the Dodgers to get Machado. I mean, that could change the complexion of the entire National League. We could move someone around, and we could get him. So what you're hoping is you want to create a bidding war, and I feel like this could potentially be the spark. Now, with the Dodgers specifically, there's been a lot of talk as far as them trying to stay underneath the luxury tax threshold. With what Manny's making, the prorated amount that would be remaining, it looks like that would be okay. But I would even, if I'm the Orioles, I would even say, hey, I'll throw in a couple $1 million if that means I can get another really good prospect out of this rental. They need to be, all options need to be on the table is my point. And to me, this shouldn't be a case where you're telling them we want to wait a little bit longer. It should be much more, what are you willing to pay at this point, knowing that you're off to a bad start. Seager's not walking through that door because he's having Tommy John surgery. So do you want to wait and have 3.5 months of Manny Machado, or do you want to see about making a deal at some point here in the next week or two and you have close to 5 months of Manny Machado? That's where you would think you'd want to be aggressive here. And the question is, well, if you do want to be aggressive, who's leading that charge? Who is heading that up? And that brings us back to our original question as far as who exactly is going to orchestrate this thing now, and certainly for the big picture, who's going to be orchestrating this thing beyond 2018. And that's where you kind of look and you shrug your shoulders, and we can all think what might happen, but I feel like we're not going to have any idea until it actually just happens and there's some kind of a random announcement made and, oh, okay, that's the direction you're going. And until then, we're just going to be scratching our heads.
He is Luke Jones. He is Baltimore Luke out on Twitter as well as at WNST.net. All of our WNST programming brought to you by our friends at Pizza John's. Luke loves Pizza John's pizza, but he lives really, really far away up in Shrewsbury. Right, Luke?
Yeah.
Come all that way and not get the meat sauce, you'd feel cheated, right?
Yeah, definitely be making that drive sometime here in the near future.
Well, I mean, there are a lot of folks that live in places like Shrewsbury that have never had Pizza John's, so I'm here to tell them about it. Back River Deck Road, 50 years they've been doing it down there. I'm celebrating my 50th birthday in Nashville, Tennessee. We're doing a Tennessee whiskey tour. I only have 50 seats. I sold 13 on the first day to one group that's going down with us. We're doing a whiskey tour on Monday at the Jack Daniel's Distillery. All the details up under the Road Trips tab. Also, the trip to Charlotte is there, and we have 3 trips for the Ray Lewis. One for Thursday night in the game, one for Friday, and just getting out there early and going to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and doing all that on Saturday, and then just an out and back on Saturday for the Ray Lewis events on Saturday night. It is the weekend of August 3rd. Which is my kitty's birthday, Nala's birthday. So join us for that. That'll be fun. Ray Lewis, Charlotte, Nashville, all on sale under the WNST Road Trips tab for all Ravens fans. Meanwhile, the Orioles are staying up late at night into the West Coast here, and Luke and I will be monitoring all that. Onto the field, anything you want to say about winning a couple of games over the weekend? I know you were relatively, you have a little flippancy in you when they were in 5th place, Luke, saying, hey, they won a series, a rare series win. I don't know how many series they're going to win, but they certainly have thrown the ball better than, I shouldn't say better than I thought, but I thought at some point with the Cashner and the Cobb and all that they would pitch okay, which is why I thought they would win 85 games mistakenly, by the way.
Yeah, and to be totally honest, I mean, they really, I think they've been a little more polarizing in that way. It's been a little more up and down. I think when their pitching has been good, it's been really good, but they've still had those Tillman and Cashner and Mike Wright outings where they've been really, really bad. So, overall, the numbers still don't look that great. I think they're 11th out of 15 teams in the American League in ERA, so it's not as though they've been great. It just hasn't been historically poor on the starting pitching side as it was a year ago, but it still hasn't been particularly good. As far as recently, I mean, they get the series win over Detroit. They're going to win series this year. They're going to play better than 8-20 over the course of the season. I mean, 8-20 is horrendous baseball. And look, that doesn't mean they won't lose 90-plus games. I'm not, believe me, my 82-80 prediction, I don't feel good about that at all anymore. I'm not sure they're going to come anywhere close to that the rest of the year to even be sniffing 500 at any point when you're 12 games under at entering the month of May. But they're going to have stretches where they play a little bit better. They're going to win series. They're going to have some time where they at least win 5 out of 7 or 6 out of 10, 7 out of 10. I mean, that's just the ebbs and flows of a season. Good teams and bad teams are going to have those stretches. But as far as this team right now, they're hitting the ball a little bit better. Pedro Alvarez had a big series against Detroit. He's kind of been the one of the nice stories of this team as far as guys that you didn't expect. It's not a young guy.
Well, he's had to work for, to get back to the big leagues. I mean, he had enough money that he could have packed it in and ended. Sure. I mean, I have an incredible respect for people that do that resurrect themselves and stay with it, with a limited skill set, but one that still clearly has had value to an 8-20 5th-place baseball team.
Yeah, and believe me, it's not to say that Pedro Alvarez is going to be someone you build around here moving forward by any stretch, but it's kind of just been a nice story. I mean, Machado has played at an outstanding level. He's looked the part of an MVP. I don't think he's going to hit 360 all season, but he's been terrific.
How's he going to look in blue? What do you think?
Hey, I think if you're an Orioles fan, if you can trade him to the Dodgers, and who knows where he ends up after the season.
Well, the last trade with the Dodgers went so well, right?
Right.
Can you name all those guys? Holton, Horton. I'm gonna look that up and see, because there were 5, right? The Eddie Murray deal. You are the historian around here. I'm just the old guy, get off my lawn guy at this point.
I just think of Juan Bell and Brian Holton, right? I mean, that's.
There was a Holton, a Horton, Juan Bell. Hold on here. Ken Howell. That was 3 guys.
Yeah, Ken Howell, right.
Holton,
that
and
was
Howell.
The other one I should have remembered.
Yeah. But I remember it sounded like Bell and Howell was like a movie, a projection company. They right? So it was like it sounded like a VCR in 1988,
Right.
Sounded like they traded him for Sylvania and 2 RCAs to be named later.
Yeah.
Boy, that didn't go well. December 4, 1988. Whew.
Yeah. That, and then you follow that up with the Glenn Davis trade a few years later, which just made that one feel so much better.
By the way, somebody crowed about online, maybe Kirkshin or somebody, about the 88 Orioles, that there was a Major League Baseball special on the 0-21. If anyone saw that.
You have not checked out my 12 thoughts at WNST.net right now.
Is there a link?
To that MLB Now, it wasn't a full-blown...
I couldn't find it. I was looking to tape it.
It wasn't a full-blown special. It was, I believe, somewhere in the neighborhood of 13 or 14 minutes. So
it was inside of it was inside of like Baseball Tonight kind of sort
of? Right. MLB Tonight, which is, and this gives me a chance to say, I love MLB Network, by the way. They do such an awesome job. So much better than NFL Network, quite frankly, if I'm being honest. But they did a package within MLB Tonight. I think it aired Sunday. I happened to catch it on Monday morning, and it was outstanding.
I'm going to book Grant Brisbee onto the program too, because I know he wrote about it too.
Yeah.
There was. So I'm reading your blog. Thank you. It's the last point in your blog. Let me plug your blog.
Absolutely. I mean, it was the 30th anniversary was Sunday of the Orioles snapping their 21-game losing streak to begin 1988. SB Nation did a really fun piece. And some of the writing was it was really fun. It talked about, some of the things that happened here in town, disc jockeys staying on the air, fans driving around with their headlights on as a show of support to the Orioles, like just so many weird things.
Well, you were 3 years old, right? 4 years old?
I was 4 years old at that point.
So I was 20, and I was working as Ken Rosenthal's assistant on the Evening Sun desk every single night that they lost. I was working, not every single night because I only worked Sunday through Thursday. The Evening Sun came out Monday through Friday. And the game that they won, I believe it was on a Friday night or a Saturday night, and I had a huge house party over on Kane Street with my pink walls, and we watched them defeat the Chicago White Sox at a house party where I had 30 or 40 people in the house. That's what a big deal the Orioles were, and I absolutely was at the Fantastic Fans game. So that's why I want to say it's 14 minutes and 39 seconds, and Luke Jones, you are a wealth of incredible web baseball knowledge. Let me just say that. So I tip my Baltimore Brigade hat to you.
Well, I appreciate that. But, it was definitely fun. I know in that piece they talked to Cal, they talked to Billy.
That's 15 minutes of my life I'm never getting back right now.
Harry Kennedy, they talked to Fred Lynn. I mean, it was well done. And they talked about how Frank Robinson was on the road. I think they were in Minnesota, and he had dinner with the beat writers at the time, which were Richard Justice, Tim Kirkshin, and Ken Rosenthal.
Kirkshin tweeted about that, and that's what I saw. That it's the only reference to it that I saw on my Twitter. Yes.
Yeah, and talked about the fact that they had asked Frank Robinson, because they were in the midst of this streak at this point, who's reached out to you? What famous dignitaries? What celebrities? What other coaches? Who has offered their support to you? And he said, the president called me. President Reagan called. And they were blown away by that. And he's like, he did. And he flat out said, Frank, I understand what you're going through. And he said, Mr. President, with all due respect, you have no idea what I'm going through. It's just such a great story. And, you think about, look, you can talk about any bad team you want to talk about, and certainly we've seen it in football. The Browns 0-16, Detroit did it 10 years ago. But anyone who knows baseball, even a little bit, the idea of a team losing 21 in a row anyway, and then to do it 21 times to begin the season, that will never happen again. I would bet a large sum of money that will never, ever happen again. And it's just, it was hell at the time for Orioles fans, certainly, but you look back at that and it's just, it's incredible to think that happened. And fun to
It's been a long time since I've looked at it. It's been a long time since I pulled it up on the web to get the schedule and the results and to remember back at what point I was in my life. And I was a music critic at the Evening Sun at the time, and I was going to concerts. Some of those nights I remember being at concerts, and I could go back and get ticket stubs from April of 1988. I distinctly remember, and maybe this is a good time to even bring it up because this was right around the time when it was getting to be 16, 17, 18, 19 losses in a row. Was like April 22nd, 23rd, 24th. One of those nights, the Capitals were playing a playoff game, and Phil Jackman and I were in his little car, his little gold car, a little Toyota he had, and we drove 295, and I remember him saying to me, 0-13. It's all funny now. It's all fun and games. The national media, they're going to chase these guys around. But 4 months from now, when they're 14 and 29 or whatever it's going to be death. And it's kind of true of 8 and 20, dude. You know what I mean? Like where they are right now. Before we even did this segment, I said, where is this going? Like, are we really going to talk about the Orioles at 8 o'clock and at 4 o'clock every afternoon here at WNST? And let me give you some of the numbers for them. On July, let's just go. On May 25th, they were 9-36. On June 21st, they were 19-50. And 23.5 games out, although Dave Stieb was on the mound against Boddicker that night in Toronto. But, I'm looking through the 88 statistics and all that stuff, and irrelevant is irrelevant, right? I mean, the 88 team was just historically, it brought a light upon bad. But Cincinnati's bad. Every year there's a couple of bad teams. Miami's been bad for a long time. The Phillies and the Braves have stunk recently. The Padres stink, often. It's no fun stinking. The Astros went through it. The Tigers went through awful teams to get to get to the playoffs. But the big question then is, do you trust who's running the place? And Browns fans have to ask that question, and Oriole fans should be asking that question right now if they're giving these creeps their money after 25 years. Yeah,
that's the big question. And to your point, and they even, I believe Fred Lynn was the one who talked about it in the MLB Network package. It was after they won. They were 1-21, and they were happy, and rightfully so. I mean, these are human beings that go through this. As much as fans and media, we commiserate and lament bad teams. Put yourself in those shoes of being one of those guys that are on the field, and you're 0-21. And Fred Lynn spoke to that point and said, okay, it feels good to win, but my goodness. He looked at the newspaper the next morning and 1-21, and you're thinking, we have 140 games to go. And that's really gets to the point you were making. I mean, it's one thing to talk about something historic, something fun, some streak that garners attention, but then you settle in and got a lot of baseball left, and you're not relevant. And the Orioles dealt with this. 2010 was very much like this. The Orioles were well on their way to losing over 100 games until Buck Showalter showed up in August, and they went 34-23 the rest of the way, and they narrowly avoided losing 100 games as a result. So, you hope there's some Buck Showalter type figure around the corner, and maybe the Orioles will be smart enough to hire that next one. I mean, they were smart enough to hire Andy McPhail. They were smart enough, I guess they were desperate enough that no one else would come, that they still brought in Dan Duquette, who I still think did a good job, even if not perfect, and they were really lucky to have Buck Showalter. So you're hoping that next individual is around the corner, whether it's coming in July, coming in November, whenever. Because right now, it definitely does look very, very bleak in terms of what's the leadership going to look like for this team and what's the direction of this organization going to be.
Something to be said that it'll be 30 years to the day on Wednesday. May 2nd was the anniversary of the Fantastic Fans Night. Yep. The Orioles won that game 9-4 in front of 50,402. Jay Tibbs, the winner in there. They were only 15.5 games out of first place on May 2nd that year. It has been 30 years they haven't won, and they've been under horrific Stalin-esque ownership now for 26 of those 30 years. It's sad. I mean, I don't know, dude. Do you not feel some sense of sadness when you sat out there last week watching the place empty? I mean, I feel it walking through the city, and I certainly am going to feel it in June and July and August, because I don't think they're going to get 34,000 people to come down there and give them $24 to bring kids for free. I was really disturbed by the Sunday crowd, because I thought free would at least bring some moths back, but it still is $22 to take yourself and your wife, and it still is a $100 day, even if your kids are free. So,
I'll say, in fairness to them, compared to the rest of Major League Baseball, it is an affordable product. I mean, it is. I mean, I think we all need to understand that prices aren't going back to what they were.
But do you want to go? Do you want to go? Sure.
Sure.
If there's never going to be a $10 baseball game ever again, I might never go to another. I'm just being honest. It's not a $65 experience for me anymore. Going to a baseball
and a
game.
lot of people were saying football's not a $125 experience.
Or that hockey. I mean, the hockey playoffs. My wife, and I've been talking. My wife hasn't been feeling good lately, but like going down to a game, a playoff game against the Penguins used to be $150, $200 get-in. It's been $75 this week, right? I mean, that's the supply and demand.
On professional sports, it's going to get to a point where arenas and stadiums are more so become glorified television studios because it's all about TV now. It really is. I've said over and over, as much as I love sitting in the press box at Camden Yards, and I mean, the Camden Yards press box offers a better perspective than pretty much any press box in baseball. I mean, Yankee Stadium has a good one as well. But at the same time, if you want me to really evaluate how Dylan Bundy's pitching, I have a much better perspective of it watching on TV at home on high definition. So, I mean, that's the challenge that pro sports is dealing with in general. Now, the Orioles specifically, it is sad seeing that. But you know what else I'll say? They did an absolutely horrible job of selling hope for their baseball team from November until early March.
We go back to the fact that nobody competent is running the place. I mean, that literally has been the issue for 30 years now. Nobody competent since Marty Conway left, and since the Rick Vaughns, all the people that left, they have not been able to attract competent people by and large, which Buck is competent, right? I mean, McPhail was competent. Dan Duquette, competent, a baseball man, but that has been the biggest issue for them, is attracting top-notch talent under Peter Angelos in a lot of different ways. They didn't have a spring training facility for 20 years. So, there was all sorts of things behind the scenes. Agents wouldn't steer players, all sorts of cocktails, pissing off people like me who set up an entire media empire to serve them and promote them and inform people about them, and they put a wall up. So there's a lot of layers to why the place is empty beyond kids are free and the price and the state of the city and the riots and all that's gone into that.
That's a big part of it. Let's not...
I agree with that.
Yeah.
I agree with that. I check every box. But they've done so much wrong that I don't even know where to shine the light on what's been right. I mean, what's been right has been they've won recently, and they've had guys like Manny Machado and Buck Showalter and Adam, professionals, people who are good at what they do, which that's been a really, really spotty, long-term issue for the Angelos family in the baseball business.
Yeah, there's no question. But they do deserve credit for what has happened over the last 6-7 years. But now it's very clear that era, to some level, whether that means, that Buck Showalter might still be the manager next year. In fact, I think that's far more likely than Dan Duquette returning at this point. But this current era is coming to an end, and what's going to happen next, and especially what's going to happen with ownership, as it's very clear that Peter's, this era of Peter being in charge is very much this is changing. So
this fits into Buck's motif, though. If Buck were really running it and not Brady, because Buck loved himself some Arizona Diamondbacks, He loved picking out the uniforms and, and being involved in all of that. That would serve Buck's needs if Peter were gone and Buck were sort of the de facto owner, executive next to the owner kind of thing. What remains to be seen is who's really going to run the place, and whether the mafia at Major League Baseball is going to allow these kids to have the team, or whether they're going to pull a power play over the $400 million that they already owe the Nationals. There's been a lot of conjecture about that, but there's always been a very, very powerful center at Major League Baseball. See John Henry, see the Marlins and the Red Sox and all the stuff that's gone on there, that there's going to be a real power struggle about the future of this franchise and the direction of the franchise once Peter's no longer involved.
Yeah, and I think that's fair, and trying to figure out what that's going to look like is really difficult at this point in time. I mean, I like the fact that they're offering free tickets to kids. Did I expect that to move the meter in April? No, I didn't, if I'm being totally honest. I think they're going to get a lot more traction with that come the end of May and then when school lets out. Now, does that mean they're going to get 40,000 people? Absolutely not, especially for a team that's in last place. But I at least like the measure. I think that's a step in the right direction. I think doing stuff of that nature they need much more of that. Whether they're winning or not winning on the field, those are things that are important if this thing is going to be at all viable in the future. So, obviously, winning is pertinent. Winning is paramount to this equation. We've talked about that with the Ravens at length. Ultimately, if you want people to come out, you got to win football games. You got to be in the playoffs, and you need to be competing for championships. And when that doesn't happen, you have to work a lot harder in other ways. And the Ravens are dealing with this right now. It's one reason why they put their individual game tickets on sale on schedule release night rather than July. You have to adapt. You have to work harder. And so it's nice to see the Orioles implementing some new things in that regard, but there needs to be more of that. And certainly on the baseball side, you want to see some semblance of a plan come to fruition here, not just with the trades at the deadline, but beyond that. I don't think the cupboard's entirely bare. Their farm system has gotten a little bit better over the last couple years, but it's still not where it needs to be by any stretch of the imagination. So, you need to have leadership with a clear vision. You need to have leadership that's on the same page, and there are very big questions whether any of that is in place right now, or if you just kind of have basically three individuals kind of not necessarily doing their own thing, but certainly questioning if they're all on the same page about any move that's made.
Maybe the Dodgers would take Chris Davis in the deal too, huh?
Boy, I don't know if you had a chance to see Buck Showalter's comments over the weekend about that, but I think there were, first of all, there were so many people excited when they signed him. They were making a commitment, a nine-figure contract, which they had never done. The biggest deal they had was with Jones in 2012, which was, $88 million or whatever, right around that neighborhood. So many people were excited about the fact that they were making a commitment to not a homegrown player, but a guy that was essentially that. He had never established himself in Texas and had found so much success. So there was a lot of happiness about that. At the same time, I think anyone who looked at this in the context of other aging first, maybe not aging, but first baseman on the wrong side of 30, which is what Chris Davis was, approaching as he was signing this deal. And I think most people figured, all right, if you can get 2 really, really good years, 2 okay years, you're probably going to have 3 years at the end of this deal that aren't going to be great. And I think anyone who looked at that pragmatically probably figured that was going to happen, and the last few years could be downright ugly. But if you get at least really good production over the first half of the deal, that's kind of how these 9-figure contracts have worked over time here in baseball. Not just talking the Orioles, anywhere. But for this thing to go as south as it has, as quickly as it has, it is just, it's a disaster. And I don't use hyperbole too often, whether it's talking about something that's disastrous or disgraceful, whatever. This is a disaster, and I don't know what the end game here is, even for him to get better. Do I ever think Chris Davis is going to hit 50 home runs again? Of course not. I don't know if Chris Davis is going to hit 25 home runs again at this point, because he just looks so lost. The bat speed has declined, so there's been a physical decline.
He doesn't look like a Major League Baseball player any longer.
He hasn't been. And look, I'm not saying that to beat the guy down. I don't think Chris
there is a fine line between being one and not being one. I guess a lot of us don't, really realize that. Pedro Alvarez would be a great example of, where is and isn't is, right?
Right. Do I think Chris Davis can hit better than 167? Yeah. But we're talking about such a low bar now. This guy has a 513 OPS. That used to be what he would slug, and even more than that over the course of a year. He looks so lost. When he does make contact, he's not hitting the ball hard. He's grounding out a lot. It's just a mess. And believe me, there's a lot going, and a lot has gone into trying to, quote, fix him. A lot of people want to blame Scott Coolball for some of their offensive woes. Well, if that's the case, are you giving him compliments for what he's done with Pedro Alvarez? Are you giving him compliments for what he's done with Machado? It's not a lack of effort. They've tried, and I think they've even tried some unconventional things. Trying to hit him leadoff to begin the year was one of those many, many things they've explored to try to augment his on-base capability as far as drawing walks and having better at-bats, which he has been able to do, even in some of the years where he hasn't been as productive. But to hear Buck Showalter just say he needs to get back to being a baseball player, I mean, that just kind of, it's jarring to hear Buck say that. And Buck's not throwing him underneath the bus. I mean, it's just reality. I mean, look at the numbers. Look at where he was last year. Look at the fact that they had dropped him to 6th or 7th in the order last year. The second year of this deal, we're now into year 3. And here's some context for you to tell you how long Chris Davis is under contract. The Orioles or the Ravens just drafted Lamar Jackson to be their quarterback of the future, and we can debate when he's going to take over, what it means for Joe Flacco. That's another discussion for another segment. But Chris Davis, when he enters the final year of this 7-year, $161 million contract, that will be the 5th-year option for Lamar Jackson. So that just tells you how long Chris Davis is married, at least financially, to the Orioles, and it is just, this is as disastrous as it gets. I mean, it makes the Albert Bell situation, and I know the Orioles had insurance there, whatever, but it makes the Albert Bell thing or the Ubaldo Jimenez thing look like a drop in the bucket compared to what this is right now.
He is Luke Jones, Baltimore Luke, out on Twitter and Facebook and up all night with the Orioles, and he'll be with the Ravens as they start to throw the football around out there with Lamar Jackson and Joe Flacco and all the baby birds and the Hayden Hurst all come home to roost. All of our WNST coverage brought to you by our friends at Royal Farms. Real fresh, real fast. Make sure you're downloading the app when you're pumping your gas. You'll get your Western fries, your fried chicken. Get your points. Load the points. You get your Kona Blend coffee free. If it's free, it's for me. It's ROFO, real fresh, real fast, Royal Farms. I had some fried chicken and some Western fries on Monday night. I also had some Box Hill dressing on my salad that I had with my ROFO chicken. I tweeted about that the other night. The best crab cakes in Harford County can now be shipped anywhere, but don't go to sleep on that dressing up at Box Hill. People swear by that. Buy it. Take it home. If you're up in Abingdon, make sure you stop by, say hello to Tommy and Chris. They're going to get the dining room completely remodeled here during the spring. It'll be ready for you very, very soon, but they're open for business. Get a pizza. Stop by, get a Hito. Grab one of those delicious jumbo crab cakes. I got to get back up to Harford County next week. Box Hill Pizzeria. You can ship them anywhere in the world at boxhillpizzeria.com. Fremont Mortgage is always with us. Don't make a 30-year mistake by choosing the wrong lender. You need the right lender. That's Fremont.com. Buying, selling, thinking about it. Need to refinance. Want to check the market. Fremont.com has a full university and educational program up there for you. I'm just kidding. It's 5 minutes. Read it, learn it, live it. Fremont Mortgage, our friends and our sponsors as well. Nasty at WNST.net finds me, and I'm out in the buyatoyota.com all the time for you. No static at all, like Steely Dan, who's performing at the Modell Lyric on October the 11th, so that's going to be big times too. Hey, we got also Jackson Brown Thursday night. William Shatner coming in 2 weeks, doing a Star Trek Q&A, so if you're a Trekkie, you're definitely going to want to check that out. Modell-Lyric.com, also our partners there all year long. We'll tip our caps to them. Brigade play on Friday night. Ron Jaworski's going to be here talking some Philadelphia Soul with me later on in the week. You'll want to check that out in the buyatoyota.com audio vault. But the Soul taking on the Brigade Friday night at the Royal Farms Arena. Affordable, local, fun. Randy Hipper throwing the football around down there, playing the arena football game. We're going to have him on the program later on in the week as well to promote the Brigade. There's good stuff happening around here in Baltimore. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.